like you said, it's not a crime to borrow, but what do you use these monies for?
That's correct. Now, the thing is that where we have crisis is revenue, because the benchmark, another benchmark, actually, I saw this benchmark in ERPG plan, GP plan, saying that we shouldn't spend more than 40%. That is the debt servicing to GDP should not be more than 40%. That was on the ERPG plan as an internal target. But as you see us go, sometimes we hit 60% and come down to less than, at the moment, even based on this budget, it looks like it will be around 30% or slightly more. But that is the budget. But the reality is that when you start paying, meanwhile, now, but the issue is this. The Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 placed a ceiling on deficit, budget deficit to GDP of 3%. And that is correct because we are keeping to it because that's law. But what he didn't do, he didn't set the benchmark for external borrowing to GDP, didn't set a benchmark for domestic borrowing to GDP. So World Bank in their last meeting has offered to come and help us to work out on these ratios, to see what ratio we can bring to law. Now, the second thing is that if you look at the tax revenue of the country, is about 6% to GDP, which is far less. Now, if you look at one of the conditionalities for joining West Africa Monetary Zone, is that we should have a tax to GDP of 20%. Now, Nigeria's own is 6%, Ghana is about 18%, Africa average 15%, South Africa 22%. So it's like we have to triple the tax base. But something is happening. In this last year, 2018, they've actually moved the number in the tax net from 20 million to 35 million. And it's no mean achievement in 1 year moving that. And also you've seen that FIRS, I'm not a spokesman of FIRS, but they have shown a figure of 5.3 trillion revenue, which is the highest that we have recorded. So what I'm saying that there's traction in that direction. But again, I have to tell you that the biggest gap in our revenue is that they are not supporting the Federal Fiscal Responsibility Commission, the FRC work. The reason is that if you look at that 2007, 122 agencies of government are listed in the Act. And if by the year 2007, only 90% of them never send any money into the Treasury. 90%. Now that is where you have gap. They've only, from 11 years, 2007 to last year, they've collected only 1.4 trillion naira. They could do more. And that is the place where you need to get the respite. If we can get more money, because the law says 80% of your operating surplus should be sent to the consolidated fund. You don't spend it.
And many agencies of government.
Then the 20 you keep. And they keep going. But the agencies of government just spend the money. At the end of the year, they do creative accounting. They do one account and give to FRC, and they do a separate one and give to Auditor General, and they're doing what they like. And that's not, this country shouldn't run the country like that. And if you do that, you won't have recourse to more borrowing.
The FRC has taken steps, because I'm aware that they have a law, or they have a document that has been proven. They are trying to, review it, and it's in the National Assembly, but they are not getting all the you want to say
they are not getting financial support because you can't
also
implement.
not adding a voice to it. So if we know that this is an issue, why are we not taking it up by the executive?
No, but you didn't even see it mentioned as a possible source of reducing the fiscal stress.
Because I've been at some of their meetings where they call these agencies, and they come there, they don't bring any document, and nothing is done. An example is in Nigeria.
All the documents are domiciled with the FRC. That's where all the documentation are domiciled, because all agencies return their accounts to them. But the thing is, FIRS gets substantial amount of money from source for collecting. And then you see the customs get a good percentage. But they don't get. So they don't have the resource to be able to effectively deliver.
That's another issue.
And then you don't have laws. You don't have punishments and sanctions,
which is in the new document. It's in the new document, but it's like because
it needs to come,
because it's going to give them more powers. I don't know where the issue is. So, well, Prof, that's an issue that probably needs to be looked at. The Fiscal Responsibility Commission needs to be empowered more to follow up on this operating surplus, because I mean, you need to be at some of these when they invite, because there are the times they invite these agencies. Some say they are not even aware It is that bad, and the government is talking about issues surrounding revenue. Well, that's another issue that we're still going to continue. Now, talking about the issue of tax, what you see, we have increased in terms of the number in terms of tax base and in the net. But the question also will be that people are not shying away from paying taxes, but can we also say that they're also getting, the services that they need? Because the SME or the businesses, the people who pay these taxes require some basic infrastructure, and that is not coming, but the government is still collecting taxes.
Well, the thing is that when you get more people to pay tax, then it's actually a civic responsibility, but it has an impact because people now begin to demand services from the government. That's the implication. Because when 35 million people are paying tax and then it goes to 40 million, 50 million, they will be pressurizing all levels of government to show what they are paying this for. Local government, state government, federal government. So that's a very good. But I'll tell you something else too that is missing. You cannot stop federal government from borrowing money. The Fiscal Responsibility Act actually narrowed it down to say external borrowing only for capital expenditure.
Capital expenditure.
But we need to also qualify that to say, please, bankable projects for external borrowing. Because once you say bankable capital projects, infrastructure projects, it means that you are inviting private sector to come in. And you have substantial private sector leverage once the project is bankable. If the project is not bankable, private sector won't come in there. A World Bank won't even give you the money because they want to see that there is a prospect of retiring the loan. So when we go that way, then you will get more private sector and less borrowing from government. The government can provide guarantees. Private sector like to have for the government guarantees and they fly in. But then also, more of the domestic borrowing and the government's own revenue could be used to deal with those projects that are not bankable. They're worthwhile, but they're not bankable. So if we do it that way, we won't be. If the project is capable of retiring the loan, there's no issue about debt sustainability. But the fact is that everything is being thrown to external borrowing. You're getting money from China, you're throwing everything to China, as if we're not going to pay back someday.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the response. Speak to us on the response of the Monetary Policy Committee to these the global issues that we've looked at. You said that currently because other countries have taken actions, I will also expect that the MPC will also react. What are you expecting? What are you looking at?
Well, the thing is, the central bank governor argued, and quite correctly, that during the meeting of the IMF and World Bank, they were advising that we should focus on building reserves. And then we didn't want to do that. And I can understand. Because if you turn around and start applying capital control, account controls, and then you're going to do more damage. Because what will happen is that the rating agencies will begin to knock down our rating. And our borrowing goes up, our cost of borrowing goes up, and confidence gets hit left and right. And you are going into an election year where there's enough trouble already facing you. So you don't want to add that to your problem. Look at, for example, all the debts that are domesticated at the DMO. If default in any of them, you're going to get your rating will go down straight away. So we're maintaining 100% repayment. We're maintaining 100% recurrent expenditure repayment. Recurrent expenditure. It's only at the capital end that our budget performance is very low. So I can understand that argument, but that doesn't mean that they have closed the door to looking at currency devaluation at some point.
Okay, in your final remarks, what are your forecasts for both inflation as we move into the electioneering period? Your forecast for inflation, and we've seen the GDP. Let's just see the issue of the GDP, where they're projecting 3.01% by the ERGP. But you've stated that. What are your forecasts as we move towards the elections?
No, I think we're going to remain broadly in the first two quarters, just less than 2, and then move above 2 in the third and fourth quarter, so that it will average around 2.3, 2. I don't think we're going to get 3 at all. And then in terms of inflation, the inflation will still remain broadly. It's 11.2 for something like that. So that's going to still remain broadly around that. I don't see that the integration target will come down to single digits.
Prof Ken Ife is very optimistic.
This is because agriculture, food basket, is what is driving the high price. It's about 13 points.